The wind screamed across the white valley, carrying frozen dust and sharp flakes that cut into skin like tiny blades. The alien girl stumbled forward, her body trembling under the weight of the storm. Her thin clothes were not made for such cold, and each step sank into deep snow. Her glowing blue skin, once bright with life, now looked pale and cracked under the icy air. Her breath came in short bursts, clouds of mist vanishing as quickly as they formed. She tried to keep moving, her legs heavy like stone. Her world was fading into white silence, every sound, the howl of the storm. The crunch of her feet echoed like distant drums. She was alone, abandoned in the storm, left to die. Her eyes, bright and strange with silver rings, blinked slowly. She remembered the betrayal, the soldiers chasing her, the fire in her home, the shouts of her people. She remembered running until her feet bled, until the snow swallowed every sign of her escape. She had trusted family, trusted guards, but they turned against her. Now she was nothing more than a fugitive. Her knees finally gave out. She fell forward, her body crashing into the snow. The cold burned her skin like fire. She tried to lift herself up, but her arms refused to obey. Her strength was gone. A small whimper escaped her lips, words in her alien language, broken and weak. The world dimmed. Her silver eyes closed halfway. Snow gathered on her hair and shoulders. Her body trembled once, then grew still. In that moment, she thought this was the end. No one would find her. No one would care. She would vanish into the storm, forgotten. But someone did see her far across the valley. A human man walked through the storm. His coat was thick and patched, his boots old but strong. He had spent years surviving harsh winters on this alien planet, carrying supplies from one outpost to another. He knew the land, the winds, the dangers. Yet even for him, this storm was brutal. He lifted his arm to shield his face from the snow, then he froze. His eyes caught a faint shape half buried in the snow ahead. For a moment, he thought it was just a broken tree branch. But then he saw it move only slightly, a hand trembling, reaching weakly before falling again. His heart tightened. He hurried forward, his boots crunching loudly as he forced his way through the drifts. The closer he came, the clearer the figure became. A girl, lying motionless, her body shaking weakly against the cold. Her skin glowed faintly under the snow. Not human skin. He knelt beside her, brushing the snow from her face. Her skin was icy cold, her lips blue. Her strange silver eyes barely opened, just enough to see him. She whispered something he could not understand. A soft cry of pain. The man didn't hesitate. He pulled off his heavy jacket and wrapped it around her small body, pressing it tight. The warmth of the jacket covered her like a shield. He could feel her trembling ease just a little, but her body was still weak, fragile. He looked around. The storm was too strong. She would not last here. If he left her, she would die within minutes. He had no reason to care. She was alien, a stranger. But in her eyes, those fading, desperate eyes, he saw fear. He saw someone begging silently for life. He lifted her gently into his arms. Her body was light, far lighter than he expected. As if she were made of fragile glass. The snow whipped around them. But he pushed forward step by step. Each movement was heavy, his boots sinking deep into the drifts. His breath burned in his chest behind him. The snow quickly covered the place where she had fallen, erasing all signs of her collapse. It was as if the storm itself wanted to claim her, to swallow her whole, but he would not allow it. He spoke softly as he walked, words she might not even hear. "You're not dying tonight, not while I'm here." His voice was steady, strong against the roar of the storm. The girl stirred weakly in his arms, her lips parted as if trying to answer, but only a faint whisper came out. She leaned her head against his chest, hearing the steady beat of his human heart. It was the only sound she could hold on to, the only warmth left in the world of endless cold. The man walked on, his eyes set on the dark outline of his cabin in the distance, a small wooden shelter built for nights just like this. Inside there was fire, blankets, and safety. If he could reach it, she might survive. The storm roared louder, the snow deeper, but he did not stop. Every step was a battle, every breath a fight, but he carried her as if she weighed nothing. His jacket wrapped around her, his arms protecting her from the storm's fury. Finally, the cabin came into view, its roof heavy with snow, its small chimney just barely pushing out a line of smoke. Relief rushed through him. He pushed harder, climbing the last hill, the girl's weight pressing against him. He reached the door, kicked it open, and carried her inside. The warmth of the fire rushed to greet them, glowing against the wooden walls. He laid her gently on a cot near the flames, adjusting the jacket around her. Her face still pale, her breathing faint. He knelt beside her, checking her pulse, weak but there. For now she lived. The man stared at her for a long moment. His life was about to change, though he didn't know it yet. Saving her was not just an act of kindness. It was the first step into a storm far greater than the one outside. And as the alien girl lay wrapped in his jacket, her faint silver eyes opening just a little, a question filled the room like a silent echo. Why was she out there and who wanted her gone? The storm still howled outside, shaking the cabin walls like a beast clawing at the wood. Inside, the air was warmer, the crackle of fire filling the silence. The human placed the alien girl closer to the flames, adjusting his heavy jacket around her small frame. Her body was cold to the touch. Almost lifeless, he rubbed her arms carefully, trying to bring back warmth. Her skin felt strange under his hands, smooth and faintly glowing, not like human skin. He stared for a moment. She was clearly not of his kind, yet in this moment none of that mattered. The girl's lips parted and she whispered something. Her voice was faint, broken like fragile glass. The words were not in his language, but her tone was clear. Pain, fear, and a desperate call for safety. The man leaned closer. "Easy now, you're safe. You'll be fine," he said softly, not sure if she could understand him. He poured water into a tin cup, then carefully lifted her head to let her sip. She coughed weakly but swallowed, a faint spark of life returning to her face. Her silver-ringed eyes opened slowly, glowing faintly in the dim cabin light. For a moment, she stared at him with confusion. Then with shock, her voice trembled as she spoke a single word he could not understand. Yet the fear in her eyes told him enough. She did not trust easily. He held up his hands, showing no threat. "I'm not here to hurt you," he said. His tone was calm, steady. Like one talking to a frightened child, the girl blinked slowly. Her breathing uneven, she studied his face, the rough lines of a man who had seen too many winters. Then, little by little, she relaxed. The man placed a blanket over her, adding more wood to the fire. Outside, the storm raged louder, like the world itself wanted to keep them trapped. He sat down on a chair near the door, his eyes never leaving her. Questions filled his mind. Who was she? Why was she alone in the snow? And most of all, why had she been left to die? The girl shifted weakly, her hand trembling as she pointed toward the door. Her lips moved again, words soft and quick. He leaned forward, trying to catch them. He could not understand her language, but the urgency in her tone was clear. Someone was after her. He frowned, walking to the window. The storm's white curtain made it impossible to see far. But he had a hunter's instinct, and that instinct told him they were not alone. When he turned back, the girl was trying to sit up. Her strength had not returned, yet her spirit burned. She spoke again, her voice stronger, repeating the same word, her silver eyes locked onto his, begging for him to understand. The man knelt beside her, gently pressing her back onto the cot. "Rest," he said firmly. His voice carried a strength she could feel even if she didn't know the words. For a moment she resisted, but then her eyes softened. She lay back down, exhausted. He gave her a small piece of bread, breaking it into tiny bits so she could eat. She took it slowly, her hands trembling. When the taste touched her tongue, her eyes widened in surprise. Perhaps she had not eaten in days. Perhaps no one had offered her kindness in even longer. As she ate, the man thought about his own life. He had lived in silence for years, moving from one frozen valley to another, surviving storms and loneliness. He never expected anyone to share his fire. But now an alien girl lay in his cabin, wrapped in his jacket, and everything felt different. Suddenly, a sound echoed outside, a faint crunch on the snow. The man froze. His hand reached for the old hunting knife hanging by the wall. He moved to the window, peering out for a second. All he saw was the endless storm, but then shadows, faint shapes moving against the white. His heart hardened. Whoever she was, she had not been alone in this. Someone had chased her into the storm, and now they were here. He returned to her side. She looked at him, her silver eyes filled with fear. She knew she could hear them even before he did. Her lips formed a word again, pointing outside, her voice trembling like the firelight. The man placed a hand on her shoulder, firm and steady. "You're safe here," he said. His tone was quiet but full of iron. Even if she couldn't understand the words, she could feel the promise. He added more wood to the fire, the flames growing higher, warming the small cabin. His shadow stretched long across the walls, strong and unmoving. He tightened his coat and gripped the knife. The girl lay back, her eyes still on him for the first time. She wasn't shivering from the cold. She was shivering from the knowledge that danger was close. Yet when she looked at him, she saw something new, a strength that even her own people might not have shown. Outside, the storm screamed, but beneath its roar, another sound rose, the distant thud of boots in snow. The hunters were near. The man's jaw tightened. His eyes met hers once more. She whispered something soft, almost like a prayer. He didn't know the words, but he understood the meaning. She was placing her trust in him, and for reasons he couldn't explain, he accepted it. The storm outside was only the beginning. The true danger had just reached his door. The fire burned steady inside the cabin, but the warmth did not reach the human's mind. He kept glancing at the door, listening to the faint crunching noises outside. The storm tried to bury all sounds, but he knew better. He had hunted in these mountains, and he had been hunted too. Those steps were real. The alien girl stirred on the cot. Her silver-ringed eyes opened slowly, glowing faintly in the firelight. She looked weak but more alive than before. Her lips moved, forming broken words. This time, her voice was stronger. The man leaned closer. "What are you saying?" he asked softly. She blinked at him, studying his face. She tried again, this time pointing at herself. "Rin," she whispered. Her voice cracked, but the word carried meaning. He understood, at least a little. "Sharon," he repeated, nodding slowly. "That's your name?" She gave a faint nod, her face softened, as if hearing her name spoken aloud gave her comfort. The man pressed his hand to his chest. "Daniel," he said simply. His voice was calm. "Steady," Sharon repeated it, clumsy but clear. Neil." For the first time, a tiny spark of life appeared in her tired eyes, but that moment of peace did not last. She tried to sit up, her hands shaking. She muttered words in her own tongue, faster this time. Her eyes wide with fear, she gestured toward the window, then pressed her hand to her throat as if to say danger. Daniel frowned. His grip tightened on the knife. He walked to the window and pushed aside the curtain. The storm blurred everything, but faint shadows moved again in the snow. Not random, not natural. He cursed under his breath when he turned back. Sharon's eyes were on him, filled with desperation. Then, with trembling fingers, she drew a symbol on the blanket. Her hand traced a circle with sharp lines cutting across it. Her voice broke as she spoke a word, one he didn't understand. But her face told him enough. It was her people's crest. Daniel stared. "Who are you, really?" he muttered. She swallowed hard, her eyes shining with tears. Then she touched her chest and whispered a single word. The word sounded heavy, full of meaning. Then she added another, pointing upward as if to the sky. Daniel pieced it together slowly. His mind turned the sounds, the gestures into a simple truth. She wasn't just some lost girl. She belonged to something greater. He looked into her eyes, searching for the answer, and then he realized. She wasn't just from any family. She was from the ruling family. The weight of it struck him like ice. No wonder soldiers hunted her. No wonder she was left to die. It was betrayal, and it had come from those closest to her. Sharon's face darkened as if reading his thoughts. She whispered again, her voice breaking. He didn't need to know her language to feel the pain in her words. Betrayal, fear, exile. It was all there in her trembling tone. Daniel sat back, his mind racing. If she was royalty, then saving her had placed him in the middle of a storm far worse than the one outside. Whoever hunted her wouldn't stop. They would tear down the cabin, the valley, the mountain itself if that's what it took. But as he looked at her, fragile yet burning with a strange inner light, he knew one thing. He could not hand her over. Not now, not ever. Sharon watched him, her silver eyes searching. She whispered his name again. "Daniel," her tone soft, almost like a plea. She pressed her hand weakly to his arm. Her touch was warm now, faint but alive in her eyes. He saw it. She was asking if he would protect her, if he would choose to stand against the storm of enemies that followed her. Daniel's jaw tightened. He gave a single nod, firm and unshaken. "I won't let them take you," he said. She couldn't understand the words, but the tone was clear. Relief washed across her face, her body sinking back into the cot. For the first time since he had found her, she allowed herself to close her eyes, not in surrender, but in fragile trust. But Daniel did not relax. He stoked the fire higher, shadows flickering across the cabin walls. His ears stayed sharp, listening to the growing rhythm of boots outside. They were closer now, no longer hiding. He gripped his knife tighter, his eyes hard. The storm might mask their numbers, but he knew what was coming. Soldiers, trackers, killers, whoever they were, they would not stop until she was dead. He glanced once more at Sharon, her face calm in sleep, the firelight reflecting off her glowing skin. She was more than just an alien girl collapsed in the snow. She was the key to something vast, something dangerous, and now her fate was tied to his. The cabin creaked under the weight of the storm. But Daniel knew the real storm was about to break at his door, and when it did, he would be ready. Because Sharon was no longer just a stranger in the snow, she was under his protection, and he had no intention of letting her go. The storm roared like an angry beast, yet through its cry came another sound, heavy boots pressing into snow. Steady and merciless, Daniel's hand gripped the old hunting knife tighter. His breath slowed, his mind sharpened. Years of surviving harsh winters had trained him to notice small details. And now every detail screamed one truth. Someone was outside. Sharon stirred on the cot, her silver-ringed eyes opening halfway. She looked toward the door as if she could sense the danger before him. Her lips trembled, whispering a single word from her language. Daniel didn't understand it, but the fear in her voice told him enough. The crunching grew louder, closer, until it circled the cabin. Shadows shifted through the storm. Tall figures in heavy armor. Their glowing visors cut through the blizzard like fireflies in the dark. They carried weapons humming faintly. Technology far beyond Daniel's simple tools. One of them stepped closer to the door. A metallic voice called out, distorted by the helmet. "Hand over the fugitive, human. Do so, and you live." Daniel's jaw tightened. He looked at Sharon, who was now trembling. She shook her head weakly, her eyes wide with panic. She whispered something again, faster this time. Her voice cracked with desperation. He walked slowly to the door, his boots firm on the wooden floor. His hand brushed the old rifle leaning in the corner. Rusted but still functional, he picked it up, the weight heavy but familiar. His knife stayed on his belt. The voice outside barked again, louder this time. "We know she is inside. You cannot hide her, human. Open the door." Daniel glanced back at the girl. Her eyes locked onto his, begging, pleading. In that moment, he made his choice. He would not hand her over. Instead of opening the door, he called out through the storm, his voice strong. "You'll get nothing from me." There was silence. Then came a laugh, metallic and cruel. "Then you die with her." The next moment, the door shuddered under a powerful strike. The wood groaned but held. Sharon gasped, pulling the blanket tighter around her. Her entire body shook with fear. Daniel quickly moved. Pulling a heavy beam across the door as a brace, he stoked the fire higher. Grabbing a small lantern and smashing it near the window, flames licked at the edges. Smoke began to build inside, thick and choking. He knew the soldiers had technology, but smoke was still smoke. It blinded everyone. The cabin shook again, another strike, harder this time. Splinters flew, the storm outside roared, mixing with the sound of metal fists pounding the door. Daniel turned to Sharon. "Stay down," he ordered firmly. Even if she didn't understand the words, she understood the tone. She slid off the cot weakly, crouching behind it, her silver eyes wide with fear but also trust. The door burst open at last, splinters scattering across the floor. 3 armored figures pushed inside, their glowing visors cutting through the smoke, their weapons raised, humming with deadly power. Daniel fired his rifle. The old weapon thundered. The shot slammed into the first soldier's chest, sparks flying as the armor absorbed most of the impact. The soldier staggered but didn't fall. "Primitive weapon," the metallic voice hissed, raising his blaster. But Daniel had already moved. Rolling across the floor and grabbing the hunting knife, he swung hard, slicing into the weak joint of the soldier's armor near the neck. The figure roared in pain, collapsing backward. Sharon gasped from her hiding place. Her hands pressed over her mouth. The other 2 soldiers advanced. Their weapons lit up the cabin with deadly red glow. Daniel ducked behind the table, blaster bolts scorching the wood. Splinters flew into the air. The fire roared higher, smoke choking the room. Daniel grabbed a handful of ash from the fireplace and flung it toward the nearest soldier's visor. The ash cloud blinded him for a second, just long enough for Daniel to leap forward, driving his knife into the soldier's leg joint. The figure howled and fell, weapon clattering to the floor. Only one remained. The last soldier aimed directly at Sharon, who crouched frozen with terror. The blaster hummed, ready to fire. Daniel roared, throwing himself between them. The shot fired, searing past his shoulder, pain exploding through his arm, but he did not stop. He slammed into the soldier, both crashing into the wall. The cabin shook under the impact. They struggled, armored fists against raw human strength. Daniel gritted his teeth, ignoring the burn in his arm. He drove the knife upward again and again until the visor cracked, sparks flying. The soldier fell limp. Sliding to the ground, silence filled the cabin, broken only by the storm outside and Daniel's heavy breathing. His arm bled. His body ached. But he was still standing. Sharon crawled toward him, her silver eyes wide with shock and awe. She whispered his name, Daniel. Her voice trembled. But this time it carried something new. Respect. He leaned against the wall, wiping the blood from his arm. His eyes met hers, steady and unshaken. "They'll send more," he muttered. She nodded weakly, her face pale. Her lips moved slowly, forming words he barely understood. But the meaning was clear. She was no ordinary girl. She was someone hunted by powerful enemies. And now, by saving her, he had declared himself her protector. The storm outside raged on, but inside the cabin, something else burned brighter. An unspoken bond between a human and an alien who were now tied together by survival. And though Daniel knew danger was far from over, he also knew one thing for certain. He would never give her up. The cabin smelled of smoke, blood and burning wood. Daniel stood in the middle, his chest rising and falling like a drum. 3 armored soldiers lay broken on the floor, sparks still hissing from their suits. His shoulder burned where the blaster had grazed him, but he ignored the pain. His eyes were fixed on the girl. Sharon stared at him with wide, silver-ringed eyes. Her lips trembled, not from cold this time, but from shock. She had seen warriors fight before, but never like this human, with only an old rifle, a knife, and his will, had defeated soldiers armed with deadly technology. But there was no time to rest. Daniel knew the truth. Those 3 were only scouts. The storm had covered the noise, but reinforcements would come, and when they did, the cabin would be nothing but a tomb. He moved quickly, gathering supplies. He filled a pack with dried food, water, and old hunting tools. Then he grabbed heavy furs and threw one around Sharon's shoulders. "We can't stay," he said firmly. She didn't understand all the words, but she understood the urgency. Her weak hands clutched the fur tighter. She looked once at the fire, then back at him, her eyes asking silently, "Where will we go?" Daniel strapped his knife to his belt and pulled his coat tighter. "Into the forest," he muttered. His tone was steady, but his mind raced. He knew the land, the hidden paths, the caves where hunters and beasts once hid. That was their only chance. The storm outside had eased only slightly. The wind still clawed at the world. Snowflakes spun in every direction. Daniel pushed the broken door open. The cold bit at his face. He turned back to Sharon. "Stay close," she nodded faintly. Then, with slow steps, she followed him out into the storm. The snow crunched under their boots. Daniel moved first, strong and steady. Sharon stumbled behind him, her body still weak. Each step seemed too heavy, her breath ragged. Daniel slowed, wrapping an arm around her shoulders to steady her. She leaned against him, her small frame trembling. Behind them, the cabin flickered with firelight. Flames spread across the wooden walls. The battle had left it broken, now it would burn into ash, erasing the place where they had once found shelter. Sharon looked back, her eyes reflecting the orange glow. Daniel turned her face forward. "Don't look back," he said, his voice carried weight. She didn't need to understand the words, she felt the meaning. The forest loomed ahead, tall black trees rising from the snow. Their branches heavy with ice, the wind whistled through them like whispers of ghosts. Daniel led her down a hidden path, his boots crunching in rhythm, his senses alert for every sound, every shadow. Sharon tried to speak. Her voice weak, she pointed upward to the stormy sky and whispered something in her language. Daniel caught only one word, repeated again and again. He frowned, piecing the meaning. She was warning him. There were more, not just on the ground but above. He looked up, the storm clouds swirled, and for a brief moment, he saw faint red lights moving high above. Ships, searching, scanning the snow. His jaw tightened. They had little time. He guided her deeper into the forest, choosing paths that twisted and doubled back. His years of hunting gave him instinct. He kicked snow over their tracks, pulling down branches to cover signs of movement. The night grew darker, the storm hiding the moon. The only light came from their breath in the cold and the faint glow of Sharon's skin. Daniel noticed it and cursed softly in the darkness. Her faint blue glow could give them away. He tore a strip of fur from his coat and draped it over her head and shoulders, covering most of the light. "Better," he muttered. She blinked at him, her eyes soft with gratitude. Hours seemed to stretch like days. They moved slowly but steadily. Every sound behind them made Daniel tense. The snap of a branch, the crunch of snow, the distant hum of engines in the sky. Yet they pressed on step by step. Finally, he led her to a frozen ridge. Beneath it lay a cave. Hidden by thick branches and snow, he brushed the snow aside and pulled her inside. The cave was dark, damp, but it offered shelter. Inside, Sharon collapsed onto the ground. Her chest heaving, Daniel knelt beside her, checking her pulse, still weak but steady. He placed his hand on her shoulder. "We'll rest here." She looked at him, her silver eyes glowing faintly in the dark. Her lips moved, whispering his name. "Daniel." The sound of it from her mouth was soft, almost fragile. It carried trust, hope, and something deeper. He sat beside her, listening to the wind outside. The hunters were still out there, he could feel it. They would not stop until they found her. Sharon's hand reached for his. Trembling but deliberate, she spoke again in her tongue. Slower this time, her tone full of meaning, though he did not understand the words. But her eyes told the story. She was saying thank you. Daniel nodded once, his grip firm around her hand. He didn't need translation. The storm howled past the cave. Soldiers searched the snow. Ships scanned from above, but inside, a human and an alien sat together, bound not by words but by survival. And though the night was far from safe, a new fire burned between them, one that no storm could put out. The cave was cold and silent except for the steady sound of the storm outside. The fire Daniel had built with dry sticks from his pack gave a weak light. Shadows danced on the rough stone walls. Sharon sat wrapped in furs, her glowing skin faint under the heavy cloth. Daniel checked his shoulder wound. The burn was deep but not deadly. He tore a strip of fabric. Binding it tightly, his face was calm. But inside his mind, questions screamed. Who was she really? Why did they want her dead? And most of all, why had he chosen to risk his life for her? Sharon watched him. Her silver-ringed eyes studied every movement. For hours she had been silent. But now her lips parted, she spoke slowly, carefully, her voice trembling as if each word carried weight. Daniel leaned closer. "Say it again," he urged. Though he did not know her language, he listened, searching for meaning. She pointed to herself. "Sharon." Then she drew the same crest she had traced before. A circle with sharp lines, her hand shook. Her eyes filled with tears. Daniel understood at least part of it. She was not just a runaway. She was someone important. Someone powerful, but she wasn't finished. She pressed her hand to her chest, then pointed upward to the stormy sky above the cave. Her voice broke as she spoke a word again and again. Daniel frowned. Piecing it together, she was not just a royal daughter. She was the heir. He sat back heavily. The truth hit him like ice. That explained everything. The soldiers, the betrayal, the endless hunt. She was the rightful heir to a throne. And someone wanted her erased. Sharon's face darkened. Her voice cracked as she whispered a word that carried venom. She mimed a blade against her neck. Her own people had ordered her death. Daniel's chest tightened. He had seen cruelty before, but this was worse. Family turning against blood. She looked at him then, her eyes wet with tears. Her hands trembled as she reached out. Grabbing his sleeve, she whispered his name. "Daniel," her tone was pleading. Desperate, he shook his head. "No," he muttered. "I'm not leaving you." Her eyes widened. She tried to speak again, her voice faster now. She pointed at him, then away. Her meaning was clear. "Go. Save yourself. Leave me." Daniel's jaw tightened. He gripped her hand firmly. "Not while I'm here," he said. His voice carried steel, even if she did not understand the words. The meaning reached her. She froze, staring at him. Her silver eyes filled with something new. Not just fear, hope. The storm outside grew louder, echoing like drums of war somewhere in the distance. Faint lights flickered through the trees. The hunters were still searching. They were closing in. Daniel knew the truth. If he stayed, he would be hunted as well. His life would never return to the quiet survival he once knew. By choosing her, he was choosing war. He looked at her again, her fragile frame trembling under the furs, the faint glow of her skin, the desperate trust in her eyes. He thought of the moment in the snow, when he had covered her with his jacket. He had made his choice then without realizing it. He could have walked away. He could have left her to die. But he hadn't, and now there was no turning back. Sharon whispered again, her voice soft. Her hand pressed against his chest, against the steady beat of his heart. Her eyes asked the question her lips could not form. Why? Why save me? Daniel gave her the only answer he had. Because no one deserves to die alone. She blinked, tears sliding down her cheeks. For a long moment, silence filled the cave, only the fire cracking softly. Then slowly she leaned forward, her forehead resting against his chest. Her breath trembled, but her body calmed. She had found her answer. Daniel placed a hand on her head, steady and firm. His eyes hardened toward the cave entrance, toward the storm and the enemies waiting beyond. He had chosen his path. Outside, faint voices rose, metallic and sharp. The hunters were near. Daniel stood, his shadow stretching tall against the cave wall. He picked up his knife and tightened his grip. Sharon looked up at him, her eyes full of both fear and faith. She whispered his name once more. Daniel. Her voice carried strength this time. He gave a small nod. We fight together, he said, her lips trembled, then curved into the faintest smile. For the first time, she didn't look like a hunted fugitive. She looked like someone ready to stand, even if it cost her everything. The storm roared louder. Soldiers moved closer, and inside the cave, a human and an alien heir prepared for the battle to come. Daniel had made his choice. He would not run. He would not abandon her. He would stand, and the galaxy would learn what it meant when a human decided to fight. The storm outside had grown into a monster. Wind screamed through the trees, snow fell in endless sheets, and thunder rolled across the mountains. In the middle of it, the cave was no longer a hiding place. It was a battlefield waiting to ignite. Daniel stood at the entrance, his knife in hand, his jaw set like stone. His shoulder still burned from the wound, but pain no longer mattered behind him. Sharon sat wrapped in furs, her silver-ringed eyes glowing faintly in the firelight. She had told him everything, her betrayal, her bloodline, her fear. Now there was no turning back. Through the storm, shapes moved. Dark armor glinted faintly, visors glowing like red eyes in the night. The hunters had found them this time. There were not 3 soldiers, but 6. Their voices cut through the storm. Metallic and merciless, human. One called, "Step aside. Hand over the fugitive, and your death will be quick." Daniel tightened his grip on the knife. His voice was steady, unshaken. "You'll have to go through me first." Sharon's breath caught. Her eyes widened at his words. She whispered his name. Daniel. Her tone carried both fear and pride. The soldiers advanced. Their boots crunched against snow and stone. Their weapons glowed, filling the storm with crimson light. Daniel's heart pounded like a drum. He had fought before, but never against odds like this. Still, he refused to step back. His mind sharpened. His hunter's instincts flared. He grabbed a torch from the fire and hurled it into the snow. Smoke rose instantly, mixing with the blizzard. The world became a blur of shadows and flames. He used it, moving fast, striking first. His knife flashed, slicing into the weak joint of one soldier's armor. Sparks flew, the figure fell, roaring in pain. Daniel snatched the blaster from the soldier's grip and fired blindly into the storm. A second enemy staggered back, armor glowing red from the shot. But 4 remained, and they closed in. One swung a heavy strike with a powered gauntlet. Daniel ducked, the blow cracking the cave wall. He rolled. Firing the stolen blaster again, the shot grazed another soldier's visor. Shattering it, the man inside screamed. Falling to his knees, Daniel panted hard, sweat mixing with snow on his skin. He could feel his strength draining, but he would not stop. Not while Sharon was behind him. Then a sound rose, not from the storm, not from the soldiers, but from the cave itself. Sharon stood, her body trembling, her furs fell aside. Her glowing skin brightened until the entire cave shone with pale blue light. Her silver-ringed eyes blazed like stars. She raised her hands, and for the first time, Daniel saw her true power. The soldiers froze, even their mechanical voices faltering. The air. One hissed. Sharon's voice rang out, not weak this time, but filled with authority. Her words thundered through the storm. Though Daniel did not understand them, he understood the meaning. She was no longer running, no longer begging. She was claiming who she was. The storm outside seemed to answer her. The wind howled louder. Snow twisted into a spiral. Energy crackled around her like lightning. One soldier aimed his blaster at her. Daniel leapt forward, slamming into him, knocking the weapon aside. The shot seared into the wall, spraying stone and fire. Daniel's knife drove into the soldier's chest plate. Forcing him back, the others tried to rush Sharon, but they stopped as the air itself shifted. She lifted her hand and the snowstorm obeyed. A surge of freezing wind roared into the cave, slamming the soldiers back like leaves in a flood. They screamed, their armor frosting over, their visors cracked, their weapons shorted out. The storm inside the cave was hers and hers alone. Daniel shielded his face from the icy blast. His eyes wide with awe, he had saved her in the snow, but now she was saving them both. The last soldier tried to crawl forward, his voice desperate. "The air cannot live," he shouted. Sharon's silver eyes burned as she raised her hand. A final wave of storm energy struck. The soldier's visor shattered, and he fell still in the snow. Silence followed. Only the wind outside howled. Daniel lowered his arm, his knife still tight in his hand. He looked at Sharon, her body glowing, her breath heavy. Slowly, her light dimmed, her knees gave way, and she collapsed. Daniel rushed forward, catching her before she hit the ground. Her head rested against his chest. Her silver eyes flickered open. Her voice was faint but steady, safe. "Daniel," he held her tightly, his chest heaving. "Yes," he whispered. "You're safe." For a moment neither spoke. The cave was filled with nothing but the crackle of fire and the dying storm outside. Daniel looked down at her, realizing the truth. He had not just saved an alien girl. He had saved a queen in the making, a force greater than anything he had ever known. And Sharon, looking up at him, realized her own truth. No crown, no power, no army had given her hope. It was a single human, standing with nothing but courage. The hunters were gone, the storm had eased. Dawn's light began to break through the clouds. Daniel tightened his arms around her, his voice low but firm. "We'll face whatever comes. Together." Her lips curved into a faint smile. Her hand weakly gripped his. And in that moment, a bond stronger than blood, stronger than betrayal, stronger than fear was forged. The human and the alien heir had faced the storm and survived. And the galaxy would never be the same again.